Today, we will be continuing our conversation about film and filmmaking. We are super excited to have a special guest, John Öhrn. John is an Indigenous filmmaker born in BC, raised in the prairies, and now based in Vancouver. Having worked on various documentaries and live action projects over the pandemic, John has found his stride in animation production. John, who currently works for Doberman Pictures, has worked on animating projects such as Rhyme Town, which is now available on Netflix, as well as Not Quite Narwhal, which will air on Netflix in mid to late 2023. Welcome, John.
Hi, Bridget.
So we'll just jump right into our first question. John, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved in the film industry and what projects you've been working on.
I'm an Indigenous filmmaker from BC. My mom is Tsikini. I'm Tsikini from McLeod Lake, which is near Prince George. And I was raised in the prairies in Saskatchewan. And after I graduated high school, I moved out west and just worked on the island for a while in Victoria. And then I decided to go to film school about 8 years ago. And I specialized in screenwriting in my film program. And then after film school, I ended up working for a documentary company for a little while, working on various projects with Indigenous communities and other kind of marginalized groups. And basically a contract was about to expire with that company, and I was just looking for other work and found myself at an animation studio. And it turns out I really love it and I really clicked with it. So yeah, now I'm like an animation guy.
Right. Awesome. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your transition to animation and what about animation you really feel passionate about?
Animation, I mean, it kind of came unexpectedly. If you asked me in film school if I was ever interested in working in animation, I probably would have said no. I do like animation, but my mindset at that time was really focused towards live action, narrative kind of stuff. And the animation thing came up basically because I was looking for work, and I always like to learn new things and new challenges and that kind of thing. So an opportunity came up to be a production assistant at a local small animation studio. And I said, why not? Went to the interview, and the people were just so incredible and so amazing. And the work that they were doing, the project that they were working on at the time, which was Rhyme Town, was just super adorable and beautiful. And yeah, and I just wanted to be a part of that project. And I really wanted to just work with those people because they were so amazing. Animation's great because it's creative and technical. And I've always kind of had a creative mind and been, into computers and electronics and that kind of stuff. So it really was a natural fit to go into animation production. And also the contracts tend to be longer for producers in animation as opposed to like documentary or live action. With documentary and live action, sometimes the contracts are only like 1 to 3 months. And with animation, oftentimes they're like a year. So there's a bit of job security in it as well. And it's just super fun. I get to watch cartoons all day for a living.
Yeah. Sounds like your company is just great. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Doberman Pictures and kind of what you guys are doing there and just how things went over COVID and just tell us about Doberman Pictures.
Yeah, Doberman was started in 2019 by a couple guys who worked in other studios and had worked in animation for a really long time. And when I started there, I think there was less than 30 people. It was a pretty small crew. And, that was 3 years ago. And we have since like quadrupled in size, I would say. At least we have probably about 4 times that. So, yeah, it was an interesting time for a company to grow, but we have a really, really amazing relationship with DreamWorks Animation, who are based in Los Angeles, and they're a pretty big company. They're responsible for Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon and all these amazing, yeah, amazing properties. And when I went to film school, and I think anybody who's gone to film school has heard the same thing. You just hear a lot about like executives and how they can be pretty crappy and mean and like kind of cold and that kind of thing. You just hear all these horror stories. But I mean, working with DreamWorks has been absolutely amazing. Like, they're such incredible people. They're super conscientious. They love the work that we do. They're always giving us compliments and giving us work. And yeah, so we're really lucky to have landed that partnership with them, and we hope to continue working on projects with them for as long as possible. So, and so far, it's looking good. It's a really great studio. They're super inclusive, really focused on diversity and focused on the mental health of their staff, and yeah, I just can't say enough good about Doberman. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if you're comfortable telling us a little bit about your experience with the pandemic and how you chose to keep it together, as we say, and tell me a little bit about how it may have changed or affected your job and in animation and everything like that.
Yeah, well, I was living in Vancouver in 2019 when I first got the job. And then I was going out to the prairies just to go back there for a while. I wasn't sure how long I was going to be there, maybe 3 months or something, just to kind of be near my family. All my family is out there, so my parents are there. They live just outside of Saskatoon. So I went back and I was visiting with them, and the pandemic happened. And so all of a sudden, I wasn't sure how long I was going to be there, if I was just going to plant roots there and just kind of stay out in Saskatoon. Interprovincial travel was kind of frowned upon at that time. And so I was, like everyone else, just didn't really know what was happening next. So it really looked like I was having to quit my job at the animation studio, and ended up finding some other work in the prairies, and was just kind of bummed out because during that time I had really loved working for the studio that I work for. And like everyone else, didn't really know what was happening, what was going on. So I was working this other job, but it was really nice because I was close to my family at that time. So in a way, it was almost like perfect timing to go back. I was able to spend a lot more time with them. And my parents, they are big powwow people, so they hit up all of the powwows all over the prairies every summer. And due to the pandemic, all of that stuff was canceled. So they weren't able to spend time with their network and their community and celebrate with them all summer long, which they've been doing for years and years and years. So it was really good to be near them at that time, so that they had a little more family around. And yeah, so in retrospect, that ended up being kind of great. And then I was in touch with the one of the founders of the studio. Just emailed to check in, see how I was doing. We were kind of just having a back and forth. Oh yeah, this is how things are going, and they were able to start me in like working for the studio again remotely. So they sent a laptop out there, and I was able to continue my job doing the remote thing, because by that time they had kind of adapted the studio to a lot more work from home stuff, as much or as a lot of places had done. And yeah, that was really great. So, if I had wanted to do documentary or live action film work or anything in the prairies, I mean, not only is there not a lot being done in live action and documentary out there, but also due to COVID protocols and stuff, there really wasn't anything happening. So with animation, it's easy to work from home because there's no set, there's nothing like that you have to worry about. So yeah, it was great. I ended up being able to continue working for them.
Right. You're one of the lucky ones that was able to continue to do the job that they love while this chaos was ensuing all around us. So I assume like your
Absolutely.
job was kind of how you were able to keep it together, being able to continue that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was the job, and like I said, being close to my family and stuff after living out west for over a decade. It was really nice to be able to spend time with them, and as you said, like continue doing the work that I love. 100% getting to continue doing that work that I really love for a studio that I really admire. That was totally beneficial in terms of keeping it together. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that over the course of the pandemic, a lot of people spent time watching movies while hanging out at home because for a long time that was kind of one of the only things that we really could do because we had to stay indoors. While all this screen time is typically seen as a negative thing, I think there's also a lot of really positive things that can come out of this medium. And so I was wondering, from an Indigenous perspective, how do you think engaging with films might contribute to things like community and well-being?
Well, there's a lot of Indigenous documentary that's been coming out over the last number of years, which shine a light on different aspects of what's happening in communities all across Canada. And I think that having the time to seek out and watch these and learn about these really amazing stories from these really amazing producers and directors. I think it's just such a great opportunity to learn. They help bring awareness and understanding to topics that other people might not know about. Films like We Will Stand Up about Colton Bushi. Tasha Hubbard made that film, and The Meaning of Empathy by Elmaya Tailfeathers about bringing harm reduction practices to her First Nation and the Blackfoot people. I think it's just a really positive thing to be able to consume that kind of media and learn so much about things that a lot of people don't really know about, and a lot of things that aren't covered in the media or are covered with a bit of bias from the media. And then there's like the narrative storytelling. There's nothing wrong with just like during the pandemic, it's kind of like an escape a little bit. It's watching fictional movies and comedies, having a laugh. Like honestly, I think that there's something to be said about that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think film is almost like I know what you mean when it's like everybody's watching Netflix, everybody's glued to their screens. It does have negative connotations, but honestly, like during the pandemic, when you're kind of stuck at home, yeah, I think it's super awesome to be able to have that like escape or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you hear from the last guest that we had, we brought on Jarrett, and he is a filmmaker who was born in Morley. And so the pandemic, if you watch when you watch that episode, um, he talked about how the pandemic kind of um, it made things obviously less accessible, but he also created multiple films over the course of the pandemic. Some really popular films that are one of them is actually circulating the International Film Festival circuit, I guess you would call it. And
Nice.
so not only is there positives or have has there been positives that come out of being able to have that escape and also being able to watch more media that is made by Indigenous community members and also about Indigenous community members. A lot of his films, the ones that he made over COVID and prior to, have been about that and about the community, and they've been a way to facilitate community and bring people together. Even throughout the course of the pandemic, he was able to do that. So I think there's a lot to be said about connecting over film, not only watching it, but making it. I think there's a lot of really good things that have come out of it. And yeah, so I absolutely agree. I'll have to send you Jared's contact. I feel like you guys would have a lot in common and a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to check
So
out his work.
when we met earlier this week, you told me some ideas that you had to potentially introduce some Indigenous perspectives and content to your current team. And I think we mentioned this a little bit previously at the beginning of the episode, but I thought it was really cool. So if you're comfortable, would you mind sharing a little bit more about some of the ideas that you have?
Yeah, I don't have any super fleshed out ideas story wise, but And when you look at what's out there, like there's a lot of great stuff, but there's also a lot of just kind of mindless action focus, kind of like almost like violent in a way, like series, and they're all for children, which kind of seems crazy. So the stuff that we've worked on has all been actually really amazing, and has told really cool stories, and especially the series that we're just wrapping right now really tells, each episode kind of tells different stories in a super fun and funny and heartwarming way. The whole show is about a unicorn who is raised by narwhals, so he thinks that he's a unicorn. And then one day he's swept onto land and he sees another unicorn. So it's kind of about navigating identity, and it's okay to be different, and themes like that. So yeah, I'm lucky to work at a place where we are telling good and important stories for children. And I think that there's definitely space for Indigenous representation in the preschool market, because there's really not a lot out there. I think Dora the Explorer is a good example of what can be achieved in terms of representation and even language. Like a lot of focus in Indigenous communities these days is on language preservation, and I just feel like, something along those lines should be made for preschoolers and for kids of that age. So learning maybe Indigenous stories and like traditional stories and that kind of thing, and just learning about culture. Yeah, that hasn't really been tapped. There's a few series out there that are aimed towards preschoolers that do have kind of an Indigenous narrative, but from what I've seen, they seem to be kind of more just like fun action kind of. I don't want to say mindless, but like they're not really telling stories in an educational way. And yeah, I just think that there could be more rich storytelling from an Indigenous perspective for kids that age. So yeah, I would really like to develop something, and I have the opportunity at the studio that I work for to be able to pitch ideas and that kind of thing. So who knows? Hopefully next year I'll be developing something that falls in line with what I'm talking about. And I mean, so many projects are developed and so few are made, but yeah, it would be amazing to be able to bring something like that to the screen for sure.
I think that's our wrap. If you have, unless you have anything else you'd like to recommend.
No, not really. I say just fire up Google and search for Indigenous cinema. You'll find a lot of cool stuff that's come out lately, and older stuff as well. Um, yeah, like I said, there's some really good waves being made in television too, with stuff like Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls, and so like there's really a lot more out there than I think most people realize. So yeah, I would just
Yeah,
encourage everyone to just look for it. It's there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, John. Like I said, we'll share some links to some of John's work below and all of the additional resources that he's given us. If you have any time, check out Netflix and no, I said that wrong. If you have Netflix, you can check out Rhyme Time Town, which was the first animated project he worked on. As always, please feel free to connect with me and the rest of the team on our social media pages, which we've linked below. Thank you so much, and thanks for listening, everyone.